Welcome to Story Hour, a virtual meetup hosted by Wolf and Heron.
Arman, the stage is yours.
Awesome, thank you. So as I said, I want to talk about my career story and my professional story, where I started and where I ended. And as I was thinking about this story to tell today, I was like, wow, this is a very non-linear path, and there's a lot of common thread of luck and extreme unlocks. So I want to share that story with you. I was born and raised in Iran, and when it came to the time to decide about what to do for college, I chose to become a mechanical engineer. And that was an easy no-brainer because in high school, I used to do a lot of robotics stuff, and I had my first patent registered at the age of 16. So when it was a decision to go to college, it was like a pretty easy, straightforward decision to go for a mechanical engineering path. Throughout my undergrad, I was playing with the idea of doing different things and trying to understand what is my real interest. It kind of became clear that it's not engineering. Although I finished undergrad at like age of 22 with 2 additional patents registered, and I was selected as one of the 3 distinguished students of the year back in Iran. But I kind of realized that engineering is not the solution to all the problems that we have. And I have to tell you that I'm in the energy industry, and at the time it was pretty appealing that you make things better, you make cars and power plants and everything more efficient, and it's a pretty good path to go down that road. But I kind of learned about the non-technical aspects of the energy, like energy economics and policy, and I learned about climate change, and I decided to change my path. So I worked for a couple of years back in Iran, and then I came to the US. I was pretty lucky to get admission from a couple of universities here. It was a really random story the way I ended up in Michigan. I had offer from another university in Boston, and just believe it or not, the flights to Michigan were cheaper. So I decided to come to Michigan, take a look at University of Michigan, and then go back to Boston possibly. And I came to Michigan. I was lucky. I got a full grant that I could cover my expenses and my tuition, which was not possible to me to pay as an immigrant here. And that covered my education. And I basically graduated with a dual master's in public policy and sustainability, focusing on sustainable energy systems. During my time at the University of Michigan, I worked with the UN, basically going to the end of my, the extreme end of my passion, working on global problems like climate change. And I led 5 delegations to 5 different UN climate meetings, including the one in Paris. And that's where the unlucky part of the story begins, is that when I graduated in 2017 from the university, as you know, the political landscape in the US, the travel ban was introduced, and I couldn't travel anymore. So I would get invited to go to these UN conferences, and I couldn't leave the country because of the visa situation. So I ended up taking a job here in Michigan, working on renewable energy on a much more, I would say, laser-focused type of effort. Instead of working globally with 194 countries to find a solution that works for everyone, we would work on a small service territory, but working on developing more and more renewable energy. Now, I'm actually at the point in my career that I'm looking back, and I probably would have the flexibility and freedom to travel again, and I'm trying to figure out what is my story. You know, when I look back, it's easy to see those patterns of luck and unluck, and sometimes privilege and sometimes not being privileged to have these opportunities. But now I'm actually possibly getting my ability to travel again, and I'm looking deep into my soul to really figure out what is the kind of job and the type of role that I would like to pursue. But in one high-level trend, I can tell you, if you would talk to me 10, 12 years ago when I was deciding about my job and my career path, I would have never imagined that that's how I would end up, starting from oil and gas and then ending up in renewable energy in United States, in Michigan. But I'm pretty optimistic that by being very on top of my game and really following for my passion, I can find those opportunities. There may involve more luck, but I don't know how this story is going to end, but I'm sure it's going to have a similar theme and similar thread moving forward.
Yay! All right. Thank you, Arman. Okay. So we know the drill here. So let's start with what was really powerful and compelling about Arman's story. What should he hold on to the next time he tells it? What is worth keeping? Go ahead, Kara.
It was interesting because I did hear similarly how, because it is an odyssey story, similarly to how I could imagine seeing themes show up in somebody's resume over how their career grew and how they changed over time. I saw some of those themes slowly start to surface in your story. So I do think there is, in this story of you, which makes sense, there is a connective tissue that is already showing up in terms of where you began and where you are today, and how the different experiences you had along the way informed your direction and informed you where you want to go. So I think that the skeleton of it is actually already quite strong and there.
Thank you.
What else? What else should Arman hold on to?
I was gonna say, I love hearing stories from people who are not originally from the United States. Like, I'm always so curious as to what would bring you here and what brought you here and your interests and when you got here. And I just love how you landed in Michigan. I feel like, because I chose my college because I really liked the brochure. So, that to me, I thought was so great, because it was just like, yeah, flights were cheaper. And there was success, though, from it. It didn't, you still had success, even though it might not have been your first choice. I liked it.
I really liked the optimism. I think there's so much, especially in an Odyssey story, because you are telling a story that's only halfway complete, right? You're telling a career story and you're only midway through it. And I found it, it was like, if I'm imagining myself interviewing you, listening to this story, and I was like, oh, like I decided at the end of the story that I liked you because you were positive, you were optimistic, and you were kind of like curious in a way about yourself, that I thought was, it's like worth holding on to as characteristics or qualities of yourself that you would want to continue to convey. Any other thoughts for Arman, what he should hold on to? Go ahead,
I think
John.
that it's really easy when you're talking about your career to sound scripted and kind of rigid, and you sounded very conversational. And so, you can tell when somebody's trying to make an impression versus when somebody is trying to convey ideas. And you were definitely someone that was trying to, share your experiences and convey your ideas, as opposed to make an impression. And of course, the paradox of that, or whatever, is that you do make a strong impression. And I found it's like, going on what Lynn said, it is just naturally, especially now with like the travel ban and stuff, I want to hear more, as an Iranian who's here on a visa. And also, to second what Stephanie said, the optimism and positivity, and like that sense of curiosity about the future, and just kind of general curiosity about the world, and thoughtfulness about what's important to you and what do you see as being important to society. I liked all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that. It was.
Go ahead.
You hear me? Yeah, it's like just the authenticity. I mean, it definitely felt conversational, and it's like you were just speaking, right? And I think that's something really beautiful about the way you deliver that, because again, it didn't feel like something recited. It just really felt like it was coming authentically from you.
Mm. I think we're all kind of pointing to keep it real. You did a good job.
Yeah.
What about experiments or things that Arman could try as a way to make the story more powerful, more compelling, more influential? Go ahead, Kara.
I wanted more depth. And so what that means is, what are some of those details and context that you could take out so that you could spend a little bit more time on some of the moments that had a greater impact on what the feeling is and the messages that you want to leave people with. Mm-hmm. So I would think about, so you had an intro to your story, which you could totally get rid of. And then you had this period of time where you explained kind of before Michigan. And I would think about, from that period of time, not eliminating it, but how might you focus it in a way to just highlight some of the essentials that you want to make clear that you then can build on. And then in terms of the time in Michigan, it's like, what do you focus on? One of the moments that really stood out to me from your story was you said something along the lines of, engineering is not a solution to the problems we have. And then it led to you doing things a bit differently and approaching your career differently. So was there more that you could share about that moment? Because this is a transition moment for you. Was there a project? Was there a specific issue that you could dive into that could maybe better thread? Because then you talk about, okay, well, you switched from this focus on oil and gas to renewables, if I'm remembering that correctly, and these global problems, which makes sense given your experience. And yet those are all topics that we hear about very big picture, very conceptually quite often. And so is there anything that you could do to attach yourself to those concepts in a way that they fit into your story? Because again, is it a class? Is it a specific news story or something that resonated with you in that time period and has changed the way you think about things? So I would just try to examine that a little bit further, to go deep on some of those moments, so that just we continue to have a better picture of who you are and why those things are so important to you.
This is really helpful, Kara. And I do have a quick addition. If I could just say, like, it's usually the thing that made this turning point in my life was really looking at, you're just getting better and better at extracting more and more oil at lower and lower price. And it's not really helping with the climate change and all the environmental problems that we see. Is that something that would help fill that gap, or do you want something more concrete? Like, it wasn't a single course, or?
It may be, it depends, right? It's hard to go back and say, is one detail going to make all the difference? I think it depends on what was authentic for you in terms of your realization and your understanding. Is it that, so you're in school, so you're just learning more in depth about these issues, and then to your point, that specific detail just is like staring you in the face? I think bringing that to light would make a difference. Probably, like, it sounds right, but I don't know exactly.
I was interested in, was there a specific conversation that you had, and was this kind of a gradual thing that you came around to? Because that may be the case, and that's probably, I don't know, if you can drill down into one specific experience that maybe you didn't even recognize its import in the moment, but that was basically the turning point, like, then describe setting and, context a little bit, but that would provide a nice anchor and a nice kind of, like lever or something, that this was before times and this was the after times, or whatever.
I would actually think about, because I had the same thought, Kara and John. I had the same thought about an opportunity, and one way to think about an Odyssey story is that it's actually each little experience is its own story.
Mm-hmm.
So you have micro story, micro story, micro story, micro story, and each one of these micro stories needs to have a before and after. And there has to be a conflict or something that like changes you so that you're ready for the next thing. And so the story that Kara is pointing to with this like, oh, and I realized engineering's not the solution to all my problems. That's kind of like you're after. But what's the before, right? And like, what's the conflict? What's the moment that caused you to get to this point where you're like, oh, here's my realization. Engineering's not the solution. And then you kind of start your next story, a little micro story. And again, you want to have a little story arc built into that micro story that again has a beginning, middle, and end. Well, and I think that like to Kara's point about going deeper, where your opportunity is to really drive the conflict piece of the story in each one of your little micro stories, because that's the part where the growth happens. That's the part where we get to know about you. And that's the part where you can even bring in kind of your emotional experience as part of that story to carry the thread.
This is really helpful. Thank you all.
Whenever you realize that, oh, the thing that I want is not, or the thing that I wanted is no longer the thing that I want, or like whether that's a career or a relationship or whatever, that's always unsettling. And people might not even think of it in those terms, but it is, even like a change of major, you have to redefine something about yourself and you have to do some obnoxious menial work. But there's also deeper things involved. So some of the times that's relatively straightforward, like, I want to drop a class or what, and then some of the time, and then there's like, I want to change majors, and then I want to change careers. My marriage isn't working. Like there's this whole spectrum of moderately sucky to very, like unnerving and emotionally challenging. And you want to be authentic to yourself and to your experience, but there was definitely some of that, like, oh, I don't want to be an engineer per se. Like I might want to do something peripheral to that, but that's not what I really get a sense of meaning out of. So if you can just, even if you can capture that in an abbreviated sort of way, speaking to that a little bit would strengthen your story.
This is really helpful. I definitely have those micro stories and those scenes that I can add. So now that I think about it, like I took a long walk the last day and I said, this is it. I'm not working in this industry anymore. And I switched the next. So I can totally incorporate those in my future odysseys. Thank you all.
And
really
you've used the word scene, even though none of us used it. I was thinking it, and it's in your head, so that's good.
Yeah, it was like a long walk, I can tell you.
Thank you, Arman, for your story.
Visit wolfandheron.com to find out more about our story hours.